Hi, welcome to Quality and Food Safety with Martha, where we get to learn, apply and excel. This is where we break down complex topics of quality and food safety to help emerging and practicing professionals to be the best they can be. Let's get learning.
Every time you grab a bite to eat, you're placing your trust in this huge, complicated system to keep you safe. Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on the secret system that makes it all work. All right, here's the game plan. We're going to start with the scary stuff, the dangers lurking in our food. Then we'll get into Haccp's proactive approach, see how a plan actually gets built, dive deep into its 7 main principles, and then, tie it all back to the food that ends up on your plate. All right, first things first. To really get what Haccp is all about, we have to understand the problem it was built to solve. And honestly, it's a battle against threats that you can't even see. So, this is the big one, right? This is the question that everyone in the food industry, from a giant factory to your local deli, has to ask themselves every single day. Just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best? Yeah, that's not going to cut it when people's health is at stake. So these hazards really fall into 3 big buckets. You've got your biological hazards, think bacteria like salmonella. Then there are the chemical ones, which could be anything from cleaning supplies getting where they shouldn't to too much pesticide. And finally, you've got the physical stuff, literally things that don't belong in your food, like a tiny piece of glass or metal. So how in the world do you fight an enemy you can't see? One that can pop up from anywhere? Well, you don't just sit around and wait for it to attack. No, you build a really smart system to stop it before it even gets started. Okay, this slide is super important because it shows a massive shift in thinking. See, the old way was reactive. It was basically like a smoke detector. It only alerts you after the fire has already started. You'd test the food at the very end of the line, and hey, if it was bad, you had to chuck the whole batch. So wasteful, so risky. But Haccp? That's the fire prevention plan. It's about analyzing the entire process from start to finish to stop a fire from ever breaking out. And this brings us to the official definition. Haccp stands for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point. Now, the 2 words you really want to lock onto here are systematic and science-based. This isn't just about someone's gut feeling. It's a super logical, step-by-step method for getting a handle on risk, all the way from the farm to your dinner table. But hold on, you can't just dive into the main event. Just like building a house, you gotta lay down a super solid foundation first. And for Haccp, that means getting 5 preliminary tasks done right. You can pretty much think of these 5 steps as your pre-mission briefing. First, you get your team together. The engineers, the microbiologists, the people who know this product better than anyone. Then, you describe the food itself and figure out who's gonna be eating it. But here's the really critical part. You create a flow diagram. And I mean a detailed map of every single step in the process, from receiving raw ingredients to shipping the final product. And the last step is crucial. You have to physically walk the floor and verify that your diagram is 100% accurate. Because, let's be real, you can't find the danger spots if your map is wrong. Okay, so our foundation is solid. Now we can get to the good stuff. Let's dive into the 7 core principles that are really the beating heart of the whole Haccp system. Simple as that. There are 7 of them, and these 7 principles are what make the whole thing go. I like to think of these 7 principles as a detective's playbook. It's this super logical sequence. You start by analyzing the hazards, then you pinpoint the most critical points where you can control them, and then you set rock-solid limits for what's safe. After that, it's all about action. You monitor those points constantly, and you have a plan ready to go if something goes wrong. And finally, you have to prove it all works. You verify your system, and you keep meticulous records. So let's zoom in on principle 2, because it's a big one. Determining the critical control points, or CCPs. Now, this isn't about every single step in making the food. A CCP is what I'd call a make-or-break moment. It's a point in the process where you have the absolute power to prevent a hazard, eliminate it, or at least reduce it to a safe level. And this is a perfect example of Principle 3 in action, setting those critical limits. Look at the chicken. The CCP is the cooking step. The critical limit isn't just cook it well. No, it's super specific. An internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 15 seconds. That's what kills salmonella. Or for the metal detector, the limit is the exact size of a metal fragment it has to be able to find. It's a black and white line. There's no gray area between safe and unsafe. Okay, so what happens if something goes wrong? What if that chicken doesn't hit 165 degrees? Well, that's where Principle 4, monitoring, comes in. You're constantly checking. And if that monitoring tells you that you crossed that critical limit, bam! Principle 5, corrective actions, kicks in immediately. This isn't a panic situation because you've already planned for it. It's an if-then scenario. If the temp is too low, then you take a pre-planned action. Maybe that's cooking it longer, maybe it's setting that batch aside. The point is, there's a procedure, not chaos. Okay, so we have a plan for finding hazards, and we have a plan for what to do in the moment if something goes wrong. But that brings up a really important question. How do we know the whole system is actually working over the long haul? And how can a company prove it to regulators, or even to us? Well, that's where the final 2 principles come in. This quote right here really nails it. It's about prevention, not reaction. And it's about placing the responsibility squarely on the people making and distributing the food. This idea of ownership is what Principles 6 and 7, verification and record keeping, are all about. So think about it. Verification, that's Principle 6. That's all about stepping back and checking your own work. Are the thermometers you're using to monitor things still accurate? Are the employees following the plan correctly? You're basically testing your own system to make sure it's still effective. And then there's Principle 7, record keeping. This is the paper trail. It's the proof. Every temperature check, every time a corrective action was needed, every verification test, it all gets logged. This creates an unbroken chain of evidence that proves the system is working, day in and day out. And that, right there, is how you build trust. You know, when you step back and look at the whole thing, it really makes you think. Haccp is this incredibly complex, yet totally invisible system that's working behind the scenes to protect millions of people every single day. And it kind of leaves you wondering, what other invisible systems are out there quietly keeping our world safe and running?